Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Wine, Women, and Words. And here with me tonight is Eddie Louise. Thank you so much, Eddie, for joining us.
Thank you, Diana. I'm very happy to be here.
And let's just start the evening right off. What are you drinking?
Tonight, I'm drinking a very round and robust Old Vine Zin. So it's a nice end of the night drink with a really full mouth, and it makes me happy.
Nice. I'm actually drinking Forma de Vida. It is one of our Wink wines. It's really good. It's got it tastes like the peach candies. So yeah, I love those peach gummy candies that you find at like the grocery store when you want something sweet and you're like in the gas station. That's what these taste like, and they're so good. I'm drinking a very healthy glass tonight, so I do warn you guys that my words might slur by the end of the interview. My wonderful wine stopper broke. The rubber came off and got stuck in the bottle when I was pouring it. So I got it. I saved the wine stopper. It's a very cool wine stopper for those of you who are watching. Nice little palm tree here. Saved the wine stopper because it's a cool wine stopper, and didn't have a wine stopper to put back into the bottle. So of course I'm going to do what any resourceful girl is going to do, and just finish the wine.
Finish the wine.
Yeah. So it's a very healthy glass.
Well, my wine valet just came to the corner to remind me that he's happy to refill. I just have to ding the bell anytime I need a refill.
Oh, wonderful! You got a very well-trained wine valet.
Yeah, everyone needs one.
They do. And you can get your own wine valet. All you need to do is go to trywink.com/www podcast. Now, they won't come and fill the glasses for you, like Eddie's wine valet does, but they will send wine straight to your door. Their wines are as low as $13 a bottle, and they have recommendations based on your flavor preferences. For example, they'll ask you very personal questions like, how do you like your coffee? Do you like earthy flavored stuff, or do you like sweeter flavored stuff? And they'll create a wine profile based on your answers. And then as you rate your wines, it gets more and more specific. And nice. I have yet to find a wine that I don't like, especially when I go with their recommendations. So you guys want to give this a try, because you definitely want to give it a try. Their wines are so good. And it's trywink.com/www podcast. And if you go there with our special code on our special link, which is in the comments for the show, you get $22 off your first order, because we're givers and we love you.
Thanks.
So in full disclosure, Eddie is a friend of mine. And you guys should remember Eddie because she was on the show back in December of 2016. She was my co-host then. And I'm so excited to have her come back because now she's back with a published book. When you came on in December of 2016, you were talking about Sage and Savant, and the podcast was just starting.
Yeah.
And now we've got a book that goes with that podcast, which is just so awesome. And I've been your cheerleader for this. This is so cool. Tell us, how did it go from podcast to book?
Well, we got the attention of a publisher, a science fiction and fantasy publisher out of Canada. They're known, they're Edge Science Fiction and Fantasy Publishing. They are the biggest sci-fi fantasy publisher in Canada.
Ooh.
And they're fans of the podcast. So they contacted me to ask if I would consider doing a novelization for it. And this is not wholly untried territory. A couple of other famous podcasts have done novelizations. So Welcome to Night Vale is one of my all-time favorite podcasts forever.
I love that.
And they have some amazing books that tie in books with theirs. And then Tor Science Fiction here in the United States did, what's it called? Steal the Stars, my wine valet answering from below. Steal the Stars. And then they did a novelization of that. And so the concept was already a proven concept. So I think Edge was very confident that it could happen. And luckily, I have been trying to be a novelist for 10 years. So I had the actual skills to take my scripts and then convert them into a novel. But I discovered a problem right away. My narrator is completely 100% in everybody's head. And this is very common in old radio shows. If anybody remembers The Shadow or the Fu Manchu mysteries or any of those old 1930s and 40s radio serials, had an omniscient narrator who would fill in the gaps of all the visuals and all of the things the characters were thinking. Because radio, by its nature, is reduced to only what you can hear. And so to get the full story, you need a narrator who can tell you those bits. So I automatically copied that format without thinking about it. But when it came time to do a book, it's considered head hopping if your narrator actually can go into everybody's head. And it's confusing for an audience in normal cases. So I had to create a framework that used technology to allow him to peer into people's heads, but he's doing it through an artificial intelligence computer and quantum entanglement. And so I think it worked out all right, but it was a very interesting writing problem.
And such a fun writing problem to have too, really, when you sit down and look at it. So and that's something that I want to touch on because I love the narrator. I think he's it's Justin who does the narrator of the podcast. I love him. He's so much fun. I think, guys, don't be offended. I think he's my favorite part of the podcast.
He's my favorite part of the podcast. That's why I ended up centering the book on him.
Yeah, and I love it. And I love one of the things about the podcast is it's such a fun podcast. It's transporting you, and it's very much the escapism and that old-timey radio feel. So I love that. And I love the fact that the book has that very same energy. It converted so well from the show to the book.
Thank you. One of the things that was most fun with Justin was taking that time in the book to sit back and imagine what it must be the very first time you're hooked into the computer and then you go into somebody else's brain. You're feeling what they feel. You're thinking what they think. You're smelling what they smell. And how totally weird that must feel to have both the awareness of your current situation. You're sitting in a chair. You're wired up to a computer. And then also you're wearing a corset and you have this huge mass of hair on your head. And you have bosoms that you've never had. And you're feeling all of those things simultaneously. And it was really fun to imagine what would that be like. And it was a great deal of fun. And it was our Justin, the man who plays our narrator in the podcast, actually, when he read the book, he was like typing text note messages to me and things and laughing about, oh my God, I had dreams about this after we did that episode. So I was like, okay, I must have did it right then.
you hit the right note with that. And what an interesting piece of technology that would be too. I want to say contraption, but I feel like contraption is so degrading. Invention, I think is the right word. Because guys, the wine, it's already working. Because it has been a week. Let me tell you, it's been more of a day. It has been a day.
It's been a summer.
Right? And what's even more distracting is I was running errands and I went to a couple stores and they're already getting rid of all their summer stuff. And I needed summer stuff.
Right.
And they're getting rid of it all already. Like Target, everything's like almost gone. And a lot of stuff is on clearance, which is great. But like almost all their inventory is gone and it's all back to school stuff. And I'm like, it's middle of July. I still need a beach chair, people.
Technically, it's been summer for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I need that stuff in August. Don't bring it to me now. I don't care if kids go back to school in mid-August.
Yeah.
I still need summer stuff.
Well, so get the kids' stuff back to school. But whatever.
Yeah.
we're so market driven. Our fashion and everything now is all about, I notice that often I'll see similar silhouette blouses, like the exact same blouse, but they've changed the color scheme, and they changed the color scheme in such a way that it won't coordinate. So if this year is all pastels, there's a lot of pinks, then the next season is going to be like olive green and, you know, and really vibrant yellows, things that don't go good with pink.
Of course.
And that's what they'll do to force you to buy more new things.
Yeah, it's so market driven. But anyways,
back to books.
Back to, yeah, we're just diverting here all over the place. Because that's what we do great here at Wine, Women, and Words.
Well, you mentioned telesensation. One of the things that I have the most fun with this story is I'm researching as if I was writing a historical novel, but I have to research time going both ways because we're time traveling. So I research current technology and imagine where that technology will go in the future. And the word telesensation is actually linked to the work of a Japanese neuroscientist. And what he is doing is using AI, artificial intelligence computers, to interpret data to allow deaf people to hear and blind people to see. And this is why he's calling it telesensation, because it's the man or the machine connecting and giving those sensations for people who've lost them. And it's amazing, cutting edge technology. And right now it's at the state where blind people, they can make colorblind people can see colors using this technology. And hearing loss people can hear. They have not yet got it for deaf people who are born deaf or for blind people who are born blind. But if you were born sighted and you've lost your sight, they can give you back some sense of it. And the patients right now say it's like black and white TV. It's not perfect, but it's enough. And when they recognize things, you know, when they know, for example, that the ocean is blue and green in color tones, their brain will interpret that and fill that color in. And so it's really fascinating. But this is technology that's happening right now. But Justin is 2,200 years in the future. So I'm imagining, where is this technology that we have here going to develop? And it's really fun imagining that. It's like taking Da Vinci's ornithopter and getting to airplanes, you know?
Yeah.
Tried to fly for a very long time. We had the concept of flying for a very long time. It took a long time for the technique of the machinery to catch up with our imagination, but it does eventually. And that's what I'm imagining with telesensation, this little bit that can give limited sensation to people now, I imagine in the far future will give complete. And for things like virtual reality games and stuff, we won't just be watching them and kind of imagining the stuff that happens. We'll be actually experiencing, which means then there's that whole other level of difficulty that comes in there, because you can't exactly play a first-person shooter if everybody who's playing is actually feeling and experiencing everything that's happening.
Yeah, I see very much Ready Player One being very much a part of our reality. That could very well happen. Which is kind of scary and cool at the same time. And my thought that comes to my head with that whole whatever stuff is, Lord help the mister who tries to think, get inside my head, because I'm going to warn you now, it's like Wonderland. And not the happy Disney Wonderland. It is the Tim Burton Wonderland in my head. For those of you in the future, you have been warned.
Yeah. Nobody better try to get inside my head. One of the things that actually dictated my story being able to go the way it did is because my two main characters are actually both very focused people. They're focused in different ways, but they're very, very focused people where they kind of shut out all the voices, you know? And so that makes it possible for you to go into their heads without going insane. Although, you know, I have plans.
I love that you have plans, and I immediately gave the evil laugh because I'm a writer too, and I'm like, haha, she's got plans. See,
Well,
I'm
it's
practicing
such
my
fun.
evil laugh.
Yeah.
Gotta practice our evil laugh just in case we get into the evil league of evil.
There it is.
Yeah, we gotta have our laugh down for that.
Yeah, that's it. That's it completely. You know, I forget getting into. I'm going to run the evil league of evil. Mad Horse or Bad Horse has got to retire.
You know what? You get in there, I will be one of your lieutenants. I better get that call. You run the evil league of evil. I want to be a lieutenant. And I know Michelle, when she's not here for this part of the interview tonight, but when she is here and she hears this, when she eventually hears this, I'm going to speak up for her too. She's going to want to be a lieutenant too.
The three of us could conquer the world, sweetheart.
We do. You know, what's funny is, quick sidetrack story, then we get back to the book. When back in the day when Michelle and I were working in the call center together, and Dr. Horrible, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, we are talking about Dr. Horrible. When that first came out, she and I were obsessed with it. And we still kind of are. We always sing Dark Horse to each other. Because that's our song, one of our songs. And when that came out, we were like, okay, we're going to conquer the world, just like Dr. Horrible. That was our joke. And I'm like, I claim Australia. I claim Australia and New Zealand. And we were like, okay, we're going to divide the world just like this. I think she took out most of Europe. We determined that we were going to share Italy because that's only fair. But yeah, we're going to conquer it just like Dr. Horrible.
There you go. I saw a T-shirt today that'll be our uniform. It said agenda for the week. Monday, advance the feminist agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, tacos.
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday, smash the patriarchy.
Love it.
Thursday, SJW march with my sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, drink all the wine.
Perfect.
Repeat.
Sounds like the perfect week.
Perfect agenda.
Perfect week. Yes, that is the agenda. But getting back to your book, your wonderful imaginative book, the thing that I love about steampunk, that I feel like you're a whole nother breed of writer, and you have to have a specialty because you're not just a writer and you're not just historical fiction writer. You get the history and you get to play and tweak with the history, but you also have to be an inventor. You've got to know these gizmos and how they work and the intricacies and have the imagination to be able to think up this stuff. What's that process like with being able to imagine and create these inventions?
One of the fun things about steampunk is it's alternate history. And it gives us a chance to imagine a world where we didn't switch to petrol, where we didn't switch to fossil fuel. We continued using steam power for everything. And one of the easiest ways I found to kind of break into that is to look to the master, Jules Verne, and look at what he wrote in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth, and what was the equipment that he talked about in there, and what was the technology that he imagined, because he was imagining it as science fiction. And then you take that as, no, that's really the world. And when you see where his imagination was taking him, it's just this amazing springboard to jump off of and say, well, what else would have happened? So in my case, because I'm dealing with a medical doctor, and we all know galvanism, even if we don't understand what galvanism is, because galvanism is the electrical force that Dr. Frankenstein was using to make his monster. So in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that is galvanism. Galvanism is in its like very basic form, the application of outside electricity to human flesh. And we still use galvanism because our EKGs and our EEGs and our MRIs are basically galvanism. They're just galvanism in safe machines rather than raw lightning. But it is exactly the same principles. And so starting from there and imagining, well, what other things can electricity do? And what other things will you go?
Mm-hmm.
And then now, thanks to quantum physics, quantum engineering, and quantum mathematics, our whole world has been exploded as we are finding totally new things about the way particles interact and where they entangle and don't. And all of that, again, is being discovered by using electricity. The Hadron Collider is basically this gigantic galvanism machine, which uses electricity to move the particles so that they can observe it. And so somewhere between the Hadron Collider and Frankenstein in the past, there's a middle ground. And that's where my doctor sits. She is moving towards those inventions that eventually become the EEG and the EKG and the Hadron Collider. Mm-hmm. Moving from resurrecting dead bodies and electrocuting them. Mm-hmm. And it's this wonderful kind of mixture of modern science and historical research and mm-hmm. then guesswork. Mm-hmm. And I love it. It's really fun to play in that world and do it. And luckily, I have a couple of very good friends. One of them is a quantum physician, a physics major. Mm-hmm. And so I have some people I can bounce ideas off of and say, would this be reasonable? Would this be, and do that. So it's proven to be a lot of fun for me. It's like you can experiment and play and see what happens and what is the future. Mm-hmm. And then in the book, when I go to the far future, I have set the far future that the date is 450 years after the cataclysm. Oh. I never explain what the cataclysm is. It's just, we all know cataclysm is complete disaster, and we know what's coming if we don't change our ways with climate science and et cetera. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to imagine that it is climate related, mm-hmm. but they have done away with personal vehicles. There are no such things as cars. And all of the freeways in the city where Justin lives were centuries ago converted into living forests. And there is a pneumatic train, vacuum propelled train that moves through. And that's how he gets from place to place. But he lives basically in a forest, even though he's in a city. So just imagine if every street and every highway where you live now became a forest. But everything else of your city stayed the same. The shops were there, and the houses were there, and the concert halls were there. You just lived in this gigantic living forest.
That would be awesome. I think LA would cool. Have a whole totally different feel.
Yeah, and that's my sort of take on the future. I think we have to solve transportation. Mm-hmm. Because that is our number one bugaboo now. We went from horses, which have a relatively small footprint, to wagons, which have a bigger problem and create ruts and do all that, to freaking cars. And cars are just bad, Yeah. And so we're going to have to figure out a better way to do transportation. And of course we will, because this is what humankind does. We continually invent and reinvent and change. And so I'm going for every road is a forest. Yep. That's my.
I love that. Yes. And my way that I'm going to eventually give back is to get a Tesla. So Tesla, if you are listening, if you want to be a sponsor of the show, I'll be more than happy to test out the cars. And promote them on the show.
Tesla, you've got a 2-for-1 right here because you've got a legitimate literature podcast that is real life. Mm-hmm. And then you've got a sci-fi podcast that would help kind of get out the word of what the future Tesla sees. Yeah. And 2-for-1 deal right here.
Tesla, get on this. Start sponsoring. Sponsoring us. We will take such good care of you. Just ask me. Yeah.
I wrote a book for my sponsor, so come on.
Yeah, exactly. You could totally write a book for yours. I mean, again, we're going to take over the world, one podcast at a time.
Exactly.
Now, one thing, we've talked a lot about the future and the history, future stuff and future plans and things. me, historical fiction nerd and history nerd, you did an interview shortly after the book came out, and I asked a question about what was the most interesting thing you researched, because you guys do a lot of time travel, so of course you're going to go back in time, and that requires a lot of research. And you told a story about gunpowder that I want you to tell our listeners, because I am in love with that story. I think it is so fascinating and so much fun.
Wei Boyang. I was having a really horrible writing day, actually. And I'd written about 10 pages of the script about 6 times, and I just couldn't get into where we were going to travel and what we were going to do. And my husband said, well, why don't you just blow it up and start with a totally different idea? And I said, okay, blow it up. When was gunpowder invented? And I followed the rabbit hole of gunpowder. Now, it's first credited for use as an explosive in the 1400s, but long before that, it was used in various ways in China. And the first record of it is in 2nd century China. So this is like 176. 2nd century AD China. There's an alchemist, and his name is Wei Boyang. And he was looking for, like many alchemists, they're looking for eternal life. And he had 3 students studying with him. And he made the formula that is gunpowder. And now we're on the modern internet. We're not going to say the formula out loud. You can go looking if you must on chemistry sites. But he made the formula that we now recognize as gunpowder, thinking that it would give him eternal life. He fed it to the dog first, and the dog died. And then, being an honorable person, he chose to take it himself, because he said either he has hit upon eternal life and he and his dog will both awaken, or he hasn't. And then he's done the honorable thing and taken his own life because he had taken the dog's life. And so he drank the elixir. Of the 3 students, 2 ran away, but 1 also took the elixir out of loyalty to Wei Boyang. The next day, Wei Boyang, the dog, and the student woke up. And Wei Boyang is now credited as one of the 9 immortals of the Tao. There are books written about him. There are many of his own writings that have been incorporated into the I Ching. And he is immortal in Chinese mythology, all because of this. So I ended up bringing Wei Boyang into our story. They meet him first in China. They wake up the morning he wakes up. Sage and Savant are in the student and the dog. and Wei Boyang is himself. And they meet him, but because he is immortal, they actually meet him again in season 2, at the end of season 2. And then we find out in season 2 as well that he's in the future. He's in Justin's time. And he's a big part of my long arc over my 4 planned seasons. And he has there's a lot of things we don't know about him yet, because he's kind of a spider behind the scenes, because he's immortal, and immortal people develop this ability to, manipulate things. And so he's the one who hired Justin in the first place and gave Justin the duty of learning about Dr. Sage. Although Justin doesn't meet him at the time of hiring, he doesn't meet him until many, many weeks later. But it's kind of this long arc that's coming together. And in the meantime, I have to remember, I have this amazing chart where I'm keeping track of where Wei Boyang is and where my people are, because they met him in 176. And then the next time they met him, it was 1803. But then the next time they met him, it was 1645. And then the next time they meet him, it's going to be in 1950. And then the next time. So because they're going backward and forward in time, but Wei Boyang is progressing this way, I always have to remember the 2 different numbers. What number is it for Sage and Savant meeting? And what number is it for Wei Boyang meeting? And because Wei Boyang gives them like little clues and things of things he knows, but he's very careful not to tell them anything that they shouldn't know yet. And
very Doctor Who and River.
Yeah.
It's very much No.
I have no qualms about saying, frankly, I adore Doctor Who, and I will rip them off wherever I can.
You know, because I think Doctor Who is very much a standard when it comes to science fiction, and I think that's a very good standard to reach for.
It's an homage, you know, and I loved the way that they did the conflicting timelines of the Doctor and River, and the way they kept track of it with the diaries, and how they would compare their diaries to see where they are. And I really liked that, and I was very intrigued by the idea of what happens when timelines are flowing in different manners. And of course, in Doctor Who, it's played a lot for romance. And so I chose specifically to make this, there's nothing of romance about it. And there's a lot of mystery, though, because we don't know what Wei Boyang's ultimate motivation is, and we don't know the long game that he's playing. And it gives me a lot of fun, you know, to go, ooh, what can I create?
Evil laugh here.
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself. Again, evil, league of evil. All things go back to that. Now, I don't think we've actually even mentioned the name of the book.
The book is Transmigrations. I am a crazy vocabulary nerd. And so each of the books, the word trans means changing or in process. So transportation is literally moving something that you port from one place to another. And it comes out of the same, like, portage. It's about moving luggage. So transportation technically is about moving luggage. We've just decided that humans can be moved that same way.
Well, basically, we're luggage too.
Yeah, especially when the airlines have us.
Exactly.
So I wanted to use that prefix trans. So each book has a suffix to trans that matches what's happening. So the first book is Transmigrations. It's the first travels that they do. The second book will be Trans Animations. And in season 2, she's beginning to better control where they're going and dictate what happens with the travel. So she's animating the thing that's happening. So therefore, Trans Animations. And each of the other 2 books, I don't remember what they are off the top of the head. Oh, Transubstantiation, which is switching one thing for another. And the last one is, I don't remember, it means redemption.
So it'll be a surprise for when it comes out.
Yeah. And so each one of them will do that. And one thing that I really love that is that the way they did the text, where the trans will stay the same, and then the other word can change as it was. And the cover artist on this, oh my God, genius. This was one of those that when it came, it was like, oh, it's so pretty.
I love it when you can get excited about a book cover. I can't wait for that for mine.
Yeah. It's a very exciting moment, because I think you print out the pages multiple times as you're doing your editing and you're doing everything. So you understand the weight of your book, but it doesn't look like a book. And so it still doesn't necessarily feel real. But when that, oh, my wine is here.
Oh.
Thank you, Wine Valet.
And for those of you who are listening, if you go on to our YouTube page to watch this, all you see is just this wine up here on the screen and just pour into her glass. Because Eddie has a wonderfully trained wine valet, because some girls get all the luck.
Yeah. Anyway, so when the first box arrives, that the physical book is in, and you open that up, and suddenly this thing, and you know it's happening, you know it's coming, but it just doesn't really feel real. And the closest I can get is that moment of panic that you had as a kid. If you're a Western Christian tradition, and there's a Christmas morning, and you wake up at 4 a.m. and you panic that it's actually Easter time or 4th of July time or something, and that you're completely wrong on the date, and it isn't Christmas yet. And that's that feeling, is like that point where your book is out of your control and it's with the publisher until you open that box and it's a physical thing, is totally that feeling where it can't possibly be Christmas yet. I must have gotten it wrong. You know, I'm going to be disappointed. And so there's all these like emotions that come up, and then you hold the book. And when it's as pretty as mine is, it's just like, oh, it's a real book. So, yeah.
Well, you guys got to check out the first book. Check it out now. Read it now, because we're going to have Eddie on in January, because book 2 comes out in December.
Yeah. We're on a shortened time frame because we're trying to catch up to the podcast.
Yes.
So my podcast runs from August through May, and we take the summer off to give me kind of a catch my breath break. This year, that summer, I'm writing book 2.
Because, I mean, really, as my grandmother said, I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yes, very much, very much. So book 2 will come out in December. And then from then on, the plan is that the book will come out a month to 2 months after the final episode of each year's podcast. I have a multi-book deal, and it's open-ended because the publisher didn't want to. I told him I have a 4-year arc and I'm ending the podcast. He didn't want to believe me. He's thinking it's going to be so popular that I'll be sucked into doing more. But I don't want to do the TV thing and go too far beyond like where my story is. So I won't do more than 4 unless the story demands it. Otherwise, right now, I'm thinking I have a really good way to end it, and that I'd rather end it strong so it's a complete thing than,
I think 4 to 6 years is a good run for a show in general, because you want to be able to leave them wanting more. Yeah. And you don't want to tire out your audience. Or
your actors, or, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's different, I think, a little bit if you've got a show like Supernatural they went through their soggy middle, and then they just came back out. And part of how they came back out was the admitting that their show isn't really, I don't want to say literature, but yeah, it's not highbrow. And once they realized that they could just tell the kernel of their story, they've become almost more like fairy tales. You know what's going to happen. You know Sam and Dean are likely to die, but you also know they don't stay dead. Yeah. You know Castiel is going to make a bumbling, good-hearted mistake, and he's going to be horribly punished for it, but he'll somehow bounce back just to make another bumbling, good-hearted mistake. You know, and the thing is, because some people call that formula, and it can become formula, but I find it oftentimes shows this formula much more in things like cop shows and like NCIS or those sort of shows than it does in fantastical shows. And I think that might be the element of fairy tale. I think that we know there's monsters, and we know that there's more than one kind of monster, and there's more than one iteration of a monster. We know that oftentimes you put a monster down and they still come back. We know that those things, and I think Supernatural kind of tapped into that zeitgeist, and that's what kept their show alive. But they are literally the only other one other than Doctor Who. And I think they're doing exactly the same formula. Doctor Who is basically fairy tales in space, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think Doctor Who also is allowed to keep themselves fresh, because when the Doctor gets tired, or when the story gets tired and worn out, introduce a whole new Doctor, create a whole new dynamic, change out the characters. And that's part of the show's formula, is to change out the characters. Yeah. So exactly. So yes, we are at our half-hour mark. So thank you, Eddie, so much for joining us.
Sorry.
And that was the cutest freaking sneeze I've ever heard. It's not the elephant sneeze that I normally have.
That's the wine sneeze.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a treat to be able to sit down and talk to you. And when we get to sit down, we don't get to talk as much as we used to anymore, because we are both off doing our own writing projects. And
we live in Southern California, and you moved 2 towns over, which is the Southern California equivalent of an hour and a half in traffic. You know?
Yeah, I'm closer to it's easier for me on the weekends to go to Los Angeles than it is for me to go into Orange County. Yeah. Because I'm just south of LA now. Weekdays, it's easier for me to go to Orange County than it is for me to go to LA. Go figure. Yeah, so I'm in LA all the time on the weekend. In fact,
Our
This weekend.
traffic. I don't know if your listeners know anything about LA, but we don't measure our distance between each other by miles. It's always by minutes.
It is.
So,
it is by minutes. I remember actually, speaking of Doctor Who, I was at the Gallifrey One convention one year, and we did Breakfast with the Doctor, and it was the fifth Doctor, Colin Baker.
Yeah.
And so I got to sit down at the table with him, and we were talking, and he was like, "So how far?" We told him, where in LA we were from, and he was like, "How far from here is that?" And I was like, "Oh, it was only about 45 minutes, And he's like, "Why do you people here in California, nowhere else in the world, but here in California, you measure your distance by minutes. You don't measure your distance by minutes. You measure it by miles or kilometers." And my husband Ryan and I had to explain to him that we measure it by minutes because of traffic.
Yeah.
Because it's always...
The miles have no bearing on the time between you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a traffic jam and you are, say, 3 miles, like if you're trying to get, 3 miles through Hollywood in rush hour traffic, that could take you a full half an hour.
Yeah.
So if you want to give somebody an estimate of how, you don't give somebody an estimate on the distance, because distance really means nothing here.
Yeah.
You give them an estimate on time so that they can prepare themselves for the traffic. So if you're to say, "I'm going to go down to the Hollywood Boulevard tonight," and you say, "Okay, so you're leaving on a Friday night to go to Hollywood Boulevard." Well, saying you leave at 6 o'clock, expect to give yourself about 45 minutes to an hour with traffic. If you're going to go there later on, say 8 o'clock, maybe half an hour, depending upon your location.
You're going to go Saturday morning, you can get there in 20 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly.
One day I'm going to write a science fiction space opera where everything is measured in time.
Love it.
How long does it take you to get from one planet to another? No parsecs, no light years, no.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And thank you so much for joining us.
Diana, I've had a great time, and you guys enjoy your wink wine, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yes, we'll see you in January. You'll come back on the show in January. And then every March we do Boku de Oro. We're going to be gearing up to do Boku de Oro again in Santa Ana this March. And Eddie is going to be one of our authors.
I am. So, and in the meantime, you can find my website at my name, www.eddielouise.com.
Yes, go there. We'll share the link on our Facebook page and our notes. So thank you so much, Eddie. It was a blast. And
thank you.
And keep listening. We're going to go ahead and switch over into our discussion of our book of the month, The City of Brass. So
okay, you guys have a blast. Bye-bye.
Good night.